This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is sponsored by Mental Health Match, mentalhealthmatch.com, and also sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, everyone. This is episode number 264 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hi there, I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you're with me. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're with me on this journey. I think this is going to be an interesting episode for you. I'm looking forward to you hearing from Ryan Schwartz, who is with Mental Health Match. And as you heard at the beginning of this, Mental Health Match is one of the sponsors of the podcast. And, I will say that I'm a little bit picky about who I pick as sponsors. And when I learned more about Mental Health Match and kind of the work they've done, which is really kind of research-based directory research, and you'll get to hear more about that from Ryan. But anyway, they did a lot of research into what people tend to look for when they're trying to find a therapist. And Ryan's going to share a little bit more about his story and about his own struggles with finding a good therapist for himself and how this kind of led to him creating Mental Health Match. But anyway, I'm looking forward to you hearing my interview with Ryan, and it was a good one. He's a really, really nice guy, and I really enjoyed getting to know him better. One of the things that, if you're on my email list, you probably been seeing the emails from me about a new focus group that I've started for this year. And it's a group practice focus group specifically for small group practices that are also insurance based. I know that's a really specific niche, but one of the things that I learned, I did a survey, sent out a survey a few weeks ago, just asking people about, the kinds of things that they are struggling with, particularly within the context of group practice and that sort of thing. And one of the things I learned from that is that there's a whole bunch of us out there that are insurance based. I know there's different ways you can do reimbursement within a private practice. And I think a lot of us do choose to accept insurance just based on the demographics of the areas we live in. And so a lot of different reasons for being insurance based. Certainly being a cash based practice is a little less complicated. Some would say a lot less complicated, but again, there's a whole group of us that are out there. And in particular, those of us that have smaller group practices. And when I think of a small group practice, I think of those of us that have 10 or less clinicians in our practice. And that's the case for me and my practice. But anyway, I'd love for you, if you've got a small group practice, I'd love for you to find out more about the focus group. And you can just simply go to practiceoftherapy.com/focus group. And the next cohort is going to be starting on February the 9th. So depending on when you're listening to this, this particular episode, it might be coming up pretty fast, but I'd love for you to reach out to me and fill out the application. When you go to practiceoftherapy.com/focus group, you can see the links there for the application. And I'm going to limit it to about just 10 people in the focus group just to keep it small and intimate and us to be able to concentrate on the needs of the group. And one of the things that's been just real important for me over this past year is just the importance of community. And that's a big part of what this focus group is going to be about, is just building some community with each other. We'll plan to meet twice a month and then just have contact with each other through the Circle platform and such between meetings. But I'll be facilitating the group, and I'm looking forward to it. So if you're interested, if you've got a small group practice, 10 or less people, and you're insurance based, I'd love for you to apply to become a member of this focus group. Oh, and I meant to mention that it's we're going to do it for 6 months to get started. And then once we do that first 6-month cohort, we'll figure out what direction we want to go from there. So that's, I guess, one of the things that I hadn't mentioned in previous episodes was this focus group. And the other thing I'll mention real quickly here before we get to Ryan, my interview with Ryan, is if you're a user, not a user, but a user of Google Workspace for Therapists, and I've got a course that's out that some of you might have enrolled in the course. It's just called Google Workspace for Therapists. But if you're a user of Google Workspace, I'm in the process of getting ready to update the course. And the way I'm going to do it this time, instead of me doing all the updates, I want to get some collaboration on it, and I want to hear from people. And if you'd like to be a contributor to the course, if you'll just go over to practiceoftherapy.com/GWS updates, that'll get you to a Google form, no surprise there, where you can apply to be a contributor to the course. And if you want to know more about that, you can always reach out to me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com to ask any of your questions. But there's a large Facebook community that I got started a few years ago that has just exploded. It's got like over 9,000 members now, which just blows me away. I just can't believe that. But anyway, it's Google Workspace for Therapists, and it's a Facebook group where people just share tips and hacks and questions about using Google Workspace in the context of private practice. So you can check that out as well. So I think that's all I've got to say here before we get to the interview. But before we get to the interview, I'd love for you to hear more from our sponsors of the podcast, Mental Health Match and TherapyNotes, along with a message from one of my cohorts in the SiteCraft Network.
Most therapists know that directories can be a good source of referrals, but which directories are really worth it? We are excited to share with you Mental Health Match. Mental Health Match helps nearly 50,000 clients find a therapist every month. Their smart technology ensures you get shown to only the clients who are a good fit for your practice based on the client's presenting issues, cultural needs, and budget. And their matching system helps clients feel an initial sense of confidence in you as a clinician. If you're looking for a new way to get more clients, try Mental Health Match for free today. Just go to mentalhealthmatch.com and use referral code PRACTICE for 90 days free. Trusted by thousands of clinicians across the U.S., Mental Health Match is ready to help you grow your practice with the clients you want. That's mentalhealthmatch.com with referral code PRACTICE.
Hey there. If we haven't met, my name is Lisa Mustard, and I'm the person behind the scenes of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard, a podcast where I interview seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapists from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. Plus, you can also earn continuing education contact hours from some of my episodes. So to learn more about the show and get your first continuing education contact hour for free, head on over to my site, lisamustard.com.
One of the keys to a successful private practice is having the right systems and processes in place to make things run as smoothly as possible. With a system like TherapyNotes, you'll have more time to spend with what matters most, your clients. TherapyNotes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Your clinical records will be secure with less paperwork, which means you can give a much better quality of care. It's the EHR that Gordon uses in his practice. Be sure to check them out today by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Ryan Schwartz. So, Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited to share some great tips with your listeners.
Yes, and I've really enjoyed getting to know Ryan. Ryan is with Mental Health Match, which is, I'll just to put in a quick plug, is one of our newer sponsors of the podcast. But I think what Ryan, the thing we're going to really talk about most is just what you've learned through putting together Mental Health Match, how that really, what people are looking for when they're searching for a therapist and how we can better communicate that to them. But before we get to that, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
That's a great question. I didn't always set out to create a modern therapist directory. It came out of a very personal experience. About 8 years ago, I suddenly lost my mom and I found myself in therapy for the first time. I grew up in a family and a society that didn't talk much about therapy or feelings. And so this was my first experience, and it really was transformative for me. But it took me a long time to be able to find a therapist, right? And I think a lot of people have had these personal experiences. I kept talking to people and I would say, have you looked for a therapist? And, yeah, I did that once. It was really hard. I didn't do it. I gave up. I found it overwhelming. And I realized that there was this disconnect between, clients and therapists and how they find each other. I think, looking back, building Mental Health Match was also a way for me to honor my mom, who was such a problem solver, and was a way that I made sense of that loss and that grief. And so, I started building, coming from the client side of, what do clients need to be able to find a therapist? What is that process like for them? And then as we brought in other clinician advisors, figured out what could be better about the way clinicians connect with clients. But before I got all into that, I was actually a communications consultant. I worked for social change organizations, and I did a lot of focus groups, a lot of messaging research, where I figured out how do you talk about these issues that you care about? How do you talk about them in a way that will really resonate with other people? And so I brought that background in with me. So how do therapists talk about what they do and their practice in a way that really resonates for clients who might be new to therapy or don't have the same background?
Right. Yeah. And that's as we were chatting before we were starting to record, one of the topics that comes up a lot with this podcast is just around marketing your practice and how do you get more referrals and get people coming to you, but also, really qualified referrals that are really a good match for you as a therapist. Because one of the things that I think is really important for us doing this work is that we have clients that really energize us in the work that we do with them. In other words, doing stuff that we enjoy. It's not to get too far off on a tangent here, but I know for me, one of the things I've learned early on is that I'm not great at working with kids in therapy, and so for somebody to bring their kid to me is not a good match for me.
Right.
Yeah. So tell folks just kind of how you've put all of this together and, what you've learned so far with all of this, because I again, I think this is a brilliant idea of matching therapists, matching clients with therapists.
Well, I think that's exactly right. So, we believe that your relationship with a potential client, it starts before they contact you. They're reading about you, they're looking at you online, they're getting ideas, assumptions about who you are. And so it's really important to kind of be thoughtful about what you put forward, because that actually, it shapes whether they become a client. And if they do become a client, it actually shapes what that relationship starts off as.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mental Health Match is a system. We have a matching process where we ask potential clients a number of questions about them, everything from presenting issues to cultural needs, their budget, different types of things that they might be interested in, modalities. And we ask the same thing of clinicians. And then we have a matching process. So clients can easily see, like, okay, these are the clinicians who best meet my needs. It makes the process really easy for them. And on the flip side, so much of what we heard when we were building was, therapists would say, like, I have a Psychology Today profile and I get these emails. Hi, I'm Bob. I'm looking for a therapist. And the therapist is like, what do I do with that? Like, I don't know if they're a fit for me. I don't know what their needs are. I don't know anything about them. And so on our service, clients can opt into sending their survey information to you. So you get an email that says, hi, I'm Bob. I'm grieving and I'm struggling with substance abuse. It's really important to me to have a Black Christian therapist. And oh yeah, this is my budget for private pay. I'm also interested in potentially doing art therapy. So you get a little bit more insight there, and you can go into that conversation with knowledge about who this person is and not starting from scratch. So you can really build rapport with a potential client before you get too far down the road.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think the thing about that, and this is something I've been working with my staff on a little bit, is that you don't want people shopping therapists. What you want is people to find a good match for them clinically. And one of the things, we have therapists in our practice, some of them are on insurance panels and some are not. And so how they pay for it doesn't, that matters to the client to some degree, but that shouldn't be how they pick their therapist.
That's right. And so many times people just say, well, I have this insurance, so therefore I'm going to go find, I'll use the insurance provider directory, which, studies have been done that somewhere between 40 to 60% of those entries are incorrect anyways. And they lead to a lot of dead roads. But, they might also, one of the things that we're building right now is an insurance verification check, because a lot of people don't even understand their insurance. So they might have, co-insurance that doesn't kick in until a $5,000 deductible is met. So they don't realize that, hey, maybe going to a private pay sliding scale therapist is actually more in my financial interest. And it opens up the possibility of who you could see. So, a lot of what we do is that kind of education on the client side to help them understand, what should they be looking for in a therapist? Why is looking for a therapist different than, say, looking for a cardiologist or a bone doctor or something where, you're really looking for, did they take my insurance? Can I go see them down the street? But helping them understand that the outcomes in therapy rely on that relationship and the rapport that you have with your therapist.
Right. Yeah. So what sort of feedback are you getting from therapists and clients about Mental Health Match?
Oh, it's overwhelmingly great. Like and it's that feedback that helps me every day kind of get through the tough job of building a startup. So, therapists say that they're getting really good quality leads for their practice, that they've been able to expand their caseload. There was a survey of all the different directories out there done by an online blog called Very Well Mind, and they found that 91% of therapists on Mental Health Match would recommend Mental Health Match to their colleagues. I think a lot of therapists see that we are a values-driven company. We try to do everything we can to support private practice clinicians while keeping costs really low. So we're really out there to help folks. And I think people see that. And on the client side, I mean, we hear from all these folks who say, like, this made things really easy. Like, I didn't think I would be able to go to therapy. I put off looking for a therapist until I heard about your site, and it has just made things so simple. And now I'm connected with somebody I'm very excited to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. One of the things that people have heard from me here on the podcast before, and, fortunately, unfortunately, or whatever for us in this whole mental health provider space, is that with us coming out, hopefully I'm safe to say coming out of the COVID pandemic, I think with people's isolation, mental health has become less of a stigma as somebody that is struggling with some sort of mental health issue. And I think a lot of us are getting inundated with calls. I know with us, our phone's ringing off the hook, but the problem is that not all those people are a good fit for us. And so
Right.
having this way to make sure that they are a good fit, it just goes a long way for us being able to provide better care.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're glad to provide a service where, if you don't know somebody to refer out to, or you don't have a good fit, you can have trust in our service that someone can go to that and easily find some options that work for them. And I think that, part of it is like, you've got an established practice. You've got, it sounds like a group. So you probably have a website with some SEO. You've got relationships with like primary care providers and other folks in your community. But how do you build that from scratch? Right.
Right.
And that's where we really want to help out too. So for the folks
Mm-hmm.
who don't have all those things in place, how do they build their first full-time caseload?
Right.
And that's where mental health match is here to help.
Right. Right. So tell folks a little bit of how it works on both the client side and the therapist side as far as signing up and getting involved.
Yeah, well, on the therapist side, you just go to mentalhealthmatch.com. We have a free trial that we offer folks. It is, for your listeners, if they use the referral code, it's just practice. You just put in practice under the referral code section. They get a 90-day free trial. So, and then we ask a lot of questions. We want to know what specialties what do you specialize in? And we're adding the ability to say what you don't see, so that make sure you're weeding out folks that have higher acuity than you usually see, or other needs. We ask about, cultural background. We ask about your modalities, your fee structures. And then we have a profile that we have some prompts on. So instead of giving you just a blank box to fill out, we've done a lot of research about what clients really want to hear from potential therapists, and we've asked those in prompts. So we ask things about like, who you specialize in working with, like how you approach therapy, why you became a therapist, something that kind of gives people a sense of who you are. And then that all goes out into our service. And on the client side, there's a number of questions that we ask them. So are there certain things that you are struggling with? Instead of giving people a bunch of checkboxes, we ask things like, are you worried about a specific disorder that you want to test for? How are you feeling? Are you feeling anxious or sad? We ask about life events, and then, like I mentioned, other types of cultural needs and financial factors. And then once they answer that information, they see the therapist who best match those needs. They can click on their profile, learn a little bit more, go to their website, different things like that. Once a client contacts a therapist, like all of that leaves us. We're not a clinic. We don't provide care. We don't hire therapists. It all goes out, to individuals' private practice.
Right. That's great. Well, through this process, I know that you mentioned, Ryan, that you've really learned a lot about how we can better present ourselves, particularly in the online space, to really resonate and connect with potential clients. You want to say some more about that?
Oh, yeah. So, we've done a study where we look at, out of the almost 10,000 profiles on our site, what profiles perform best and what profiles don't perform so well. Why is that, right? So when we look at how many people see somebody as a match and end up contacting them versus how many people see the profile and don't end up contacting them. And so we've got some lessons that we've learned from that. And I think before we get into that, I'm going to put my communications consultant hat on for a
All
second.
right. Yeah.
It's really important to understand the mindset of potential clients. A lot of people come, they're feeling overwhelmed or alone. And so they're looking for connection, right? They're looking for a sense of hope. They're looking for connection, and they want to feel reflected, right? They're looking for a relationship. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. More than half of people looking for a therapist are doing it on a phone. So they're in a mindset of like scrolling, not doing in-depth reading. And they're looking for that connection with somebody. And so I think that that's really important to know, because you want to use language that's going to connect with somebody in that mindset. They don't know the same things that you do. They don't know the clinical jargon. So like when we look at profiles that don't perform well, they're oftentimes things they say like, oh, I'm a therapist who combines psychodynamic, humanistic, and rational emotive theories and approaches. Well, they don't know what that means. And that's an instant, they don't feel reflected in that. That kind of hurts that connection. So a couple of things that we see that work really well are to use first what we would call words of connection. These are words like together, you and I will. Like, it's establishing that relationship with somebody. Like, hey, I'm here with you. I'm not here for you to shop at. I'm here with you, and I'm going to be with you. So together we will do these things. And then there's also what we call words of hope. And those are really important as well. So, those are things that, what are the outcomes of working with you? So things like achieve, relieve, improve, like these types of words, that's what clients want to see, right? They're looking for that hope. And so giving them those words that say like, here's who I am, together we're going to make these things happen for you. In the communications world, we would say, focus 80% of your time on the outcomes, the solutions, and only 20% of the problem. And so often in therapist profiles, we see such a heavy focus on the problem. Right. Are you sad? Are you having trouble getting out of bed? And there's no pivot to the hope part of it. And that just kind of reinforces that negativity for the client. It makes it actually really hard for them to move to a space where they can reach out to you and feel proactive about taking action. And so those are the first two big things that we've learned when we look at different profiles, is the profiles that establish a connection by using words like together or you and I, we, our, and the profiles that use words that really are like solutions words, that like hopeful words. Those are the profiles that absolutely perform the best.
Right. Yeah. I'm reminded as you were saying all of that, and this is something that a book recommendation for people is The Story Brand by Donald Miller. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but one of the premise of it is that, and this is something that I think is a good tip for people in just looking at their websites and how they communicate with people. Your about page shouldn't be about you, but should be about your client. And that yes. What you really want to establish is that you're a guide through this problem that they're facing, and that they become the hero in the end. And that's kind of the basic premise behind the story brand. And that's the kind of the formula for movies and books and that kind of thing, is that you've got this person that's trying to overcome this particular obstacle, and they meet a guide that guides them through that so that they become the hero of the story.
Absolutely. I think the guide metaphor is a really good one here. And again, that's hope, that's trust, it's a relationship. And I think, one of the other things that we see when we do these comparisons are that it's really important to have a niche and to talk about that niche. And so, I think we often see the profiles that don't do well. They say things like, I see clients from age 9 to 90 who might be dealing with one of these 70 different things. Yeah. And when you're looking for a guide, if you're to take that metaphor further, like if you're out on a trail in the mountains you're looking for a guide, you don't want the guide to say like, oh, I do it all. I'm from the swamps or the mountains or the hills or the coasts or the flatlands. You want the guide that says, I'll get you through the mountain. And so in this way, it's also really important to have that niche. You can change that niche, right? Like you might see few different things. You can rotate your profiles. You can have something up for a month and do something else. So I'll say Mental Health Match does a couple of things to help folks. So one of the things that we do is that we send therapists a monthly data email, and we say like, these are all of the presenting issues that clients have when they see your profile. These are the clients who contact you. So, you say you do these 30 things, but the clients who are contacting you are the ones who are looking for help with trauma. So you're doing a really good job talking about that niche. Or the flip side, the majority of clients coming to your page are struggling with an eating disorder or an eating disorder issue, but you are only talking to the trauma folks. If you want to pick up more clients, you might want to refocus your profile on the disordered eating folks, because that's who's coming there. We're also, this is a couple months out, but in the next couple months, we'll be releasing a feature so that therapists can have multiple profiles, because we know what the client's needs are. Then you can say, here's my profile for disordered eating clients. Here's my profile for trauma clients, my profile for grieving clients. These are my 3 niches. We'll show the right profile to the right client so that they can feel that you have expertise in that specific issue. I think it's really important that across all of your marketing and all of the profiles that you may have, that you focus in on a few key things. Otherwise, people don't get that sense of expertise, and they don't get that sense that you're the one who's going to help them through their particular issue.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, again, speaking to the importance of a niche or niche, however we want to say that, is that if you were to think about, even for yourself, if you were looking for a doctor and say I had a problem with my knee, I'm not going to just search for a doctor. I'm going to search for an orthopedic doctor, because I know that that's what their specialty is. And I think with mental health, I think that's the thing to remember is that people are looking for help to specific problems, and that's probably how they're doing their search.
Absolutely, right. And a lot of times they might not name it. They might not know it, right? It might be too under the surface, but it's important to be able to speak to at least what people might be feeling and your expertise on that. And we learned there's 2 other things that I think is important to bring up. So we've actually learned that there's some nuance in the way that you should use the word "you" in your marketing.
Interesting.
Oftentimes we see profiles that don't perform well are using the word "you" in a way that can make clients very defensive. So, are you addicted to sex? Do you rely heavily on alcohol? These things can actually put somebody in a really defensive state of mind, or trigger a lot of negative self-talk and thinking in the moment, which takes them out of a kind of proactive mindset of looking for help and kind of shuts them down. And so, just like I think in the therapy room, you wouldn't go after and say, put somebody on the defensive or accuse them of things. You don't want to do that in your profile too. And so what we find is that the profiles that do use the word "you" a lot, the ones that do well talk about it in terms of the solution. So, and then they talk about the problem part of things in a third person. So for example, I work really well with clients who feel addicted to sex, or want to, change the way they react to life's challenges. And together, you and I are going to work to help you gain control of your cravings. That type of language, where it's like you are helping establish your expertise when you talk about a problem, but it's in a third person. So you're not making the person defensive, and then you're bringing them in and showing them the hope and what's possible by working with you. And that's the way to use the word "you."
Yes. And that resonates for me in that, part of what I do is I do supervision with folks, and there's a form of therapy called narrative therapy. I'm sure you've heard of it, but the premise of kind of what makes that work well for people is that the problem is the problem, not the person is the problem. And so that's the thing that I think that we, and so part of that, some of the techniques with that is to personify the problem rather than point to the person as being the problem.
That's exactly right. I think so, and I think that there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really great. Yeah.
And then the fifth thing that we've learned along the way, we've got to talk about this in terms of marketing. We've got to talk about your photo. The headshot photo is really important. Remember, people are looking for a connection. So they're looking at the photo. Even though that has no resemblance on someone's clinical abilities, it is really important to clients. And when we do tests where we sit down with people looking for therapists and we just kind of like watch what they're doing, the first thing they're looking at is the photo, and they will actually move on with from profiles without even reading what's there, or websites without reading what's there based off the photo. And I think it's unfortunate. I think it's a detriment to folks, but I also think that's human behavior, and that you got to work with that. So then we study photos. So when we realized this, we said, okay, what photos do really well? What photos don't do well? We have a free guide that's out there. If you go to, it's like a bit.ly link, so bit.ly/therapist photos, that'll take you to our free guide on photos. But I want to tell you, like, the most important thing about it is that you should be making eye contact in the photo. When somebody looks at your photo, they should see your eyes. So often we see people looking away. We see distractions, so that there's something real sparkly or glary in the background, so that people are looking there and not to the eyes. Or people are, we've seen photos that look like they could be used on dating sites, or photos that don't represent the niche as well. So they say, I work with, business professionals, but then the attire that's being worn doesn't match with that, right? Or and so I think it's really important to kind of match those things up, but then just look at the camera, make sure you're making warm, connected eye contact. That is the number one thing we found about photos. Like, the photos that have that eye contact, where the first thing you do see when you look at the photo is you look right into the therapist's eyes. Those are the photos that perform really well. Those are the folks that get a lot of clients. If you're wearing glasses, make sure that the glare is not in the glasses, preventing somebody from seeing your eyes.
Yeah. I think that's it. I'd heard or read somewhere, and I don't know if there's any truth to this or not, that in thinking about profile pictures that where they have their pet with them or a pet in the photo seem to do really well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly where I heard that, but yeah. So, I mean, if you're a pet person, maybe that's something to experiment with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it humanizes you a little bit, right? Like, you're not just an anonymous face anymore. You're like a person who's got a dog or a cat or whatever, guinea pig, I don't know. But, I think a lot of folks have pets, and so they feel reflected back at that when they look at that.
Yeah. You definitely want to be approachable or seem approachable in your photo. For sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So those are the 5 things that we've learned will make the biggest difference in your marketing. It's a photo with clear eye contact. It's using words of hope, so that you're focused more on the solutions part than the problems part. It's using words of connection, where you're establishing a relationship, the togethers, the ours, the we's. It's about making sure you have a clearly defined niche or niche. And it's about being careful when you use the word you, so that you are using it so that people see themselves reflected in what is possible, and not putting people on the defensive. And I could tell you those 5 tips, if you enact those, they will be night and day. You can do across all of put it on your website, go through, look at those things, make sure that you're staying away from the jargon words. So I have, when I was doing communications work, it's hard. Once you learn there's something called the curse of knowledge. So once you know something, it's really hard to remember what it's like to not know that thing.
Right.
especially after you've gone off years of schooling. It's really hard to remember, like, what was it like when you had no knowledge of therapeutic approaches, right? And so I always had my Aunt Cindy tests. I have my Aunt Cindy. She works in retail. She doesn't work in therapy. She never worked in anything that I worked on. And before I wrote anything, I would send it, or before I put anything out, I would send it to her. I would say, like, where do I lose you here? And she could look at it and say, like, what is Rogerian approach? Or like, what does humanistic mean, right? And so go find your Aunt Cindy, because the majority of people looking for therapists have no idea what these approaches mean.
Right. Yeah. It's, and I think the other thing I would add to that, Ryan, is that, for those of us that have been in practice for a while, particularly in our various niches, is that we know how to describe what that person is like, and particularly what their internal world is. And so being able to kind of bring that up in the copy about, I imagine this is what it's like for you, and this is how I can help you with that.
Exactly. Or even better would be like, I specialize in working with clients who are feeling this, and you're actually naming something that they might have that name for themselves. And so they look at that, and there's just an instant, like, it instantly resonates. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, well, Ryan, I want to be respectful of your time, and this has been a great conversation, and I think a lot for people to think about. And definitely they need to check out Mental Health Match. But how can folks get in touch with you if they want to find out more and maybe start a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. You can email me at info@mentalhealthmatch.com. Also, we are on all of the social media services. So find us on, especially Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Schwartz with Mental Health Match. And we're doing some cool things out there that I think your folks will be interested. So please do, stay in touch with us. And again, if you're interested in getting a profile up and getting some new clients through us, you could try us out for free for 90 days. Just go to mentalhealthmatch.com. And then when you sign up, you use the referral code PRACTICE.
Yes, and we'll have all the links to that in the show notes and the show summary, and you can find it easily. And well, Ryan, thanks for being on the podcast. And you're going to hear more from Mental Health Match, and you can find out more at mentalhealthmatch.com. And like Ryan said, be sure and use the coupon code or the promo code PRACTICE. Well, big thanks to Ryan for being on the podcast, and hopefully that's some good takeaways for you there around how your profiles look on various directories. And again, Mental Health Match has got a great directory, and I think they do a good job of really helping match people with the right therapist. I think one of the difficulties with a lot of directories, particularly like Psychology Today, is that when somebody gets on that directory, it's hard for them to sort out what's the best therapist for them. But Mental Health Match kind of takes the work out of that on the front end, for not only for the client, but also for the therapist. And the other thing, too, that I think is a good takeaway is just thinking about the verbiage in your profiles and really thinking about what causes clients to connect. Of course, the picture is very important, as Ryan was mentioning there towards the end, but also having copy that is there that really connects with people, and that you're really conveying to potential clients that you understand what it's like in their world. And that's going to be much more appealing to people. So again, thanks to Ryan, and thanks to Mental Health Match for sponsoring the podcast. As we talked about in there, if you are interested in trying them out, you can go to mentalhealthmatch.com and use the word PRACTICE in the promo code, and you can try them out for 90 days. So it's a win-win kind of situation where you can see how well it works for you. I'm really excited about them being a sponsor. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you are interested in joining a focus group, particularly if you're a group practice owner with a small group practice that's insurance based, and you want some extra support and really be able to connect with other clinicians and practice owners that are in the same kind of niche or genre, I guess maybe is a word, of small group practices that are insurance based, I'd love to have you to apply to become a member of the focus group. Again, we're going to be starting up on next cohort is going to be starting February the 9th. So be sure to apply before then in order to secure your seat. And also, if you're interested in contributing to the updates to the Google Workspace for Therapists course that I've got out there and to be a contributor, again, you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/GWS updates. And before we go, again, thanks to our other sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. And you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice, and we absolutely couldn't work without them. They've got a patient portal that's second to none, and also their support is second to none. But you can try them out for 2 months for free by just using the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and check them out. So again, thanks for joining me for the podcast. Do take time to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts, or subscribe, whichever one it gives you there. And looking forward to you being with me next week. I've got some other great guests lined up. I'm really looking forward to this year. And also, as I mentioned, and you heard from one of the folks that are part of the Sightcraft Network, check out those other great podcasts that are part of the Sightcraft Network. And you can go to sightcraftnetwork.com and see who all we have there. I'm really, again, that's another project I'm working on, is growing that network. And I'm excited about that too. You know, I say excited a lot, but anyway, take care, folks. Have a great rest of your week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Sightcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting sightcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.